Good evening. My name is John Rogers, and I'm a member of the Ohio Challenging Dialogues for Contemporary Issues Task Force. This task force, chaired by Dr. Jenny Hall-Jones and Dr. Theo Hutchinson, exists because President Nellis has made intellectual diversity one of his strategic priorities. His charge to the group placed debate and civility at its core. We live in intriguing times, he said, not only because of the pace of change, but also because of the clash and convergence of ideas, values, and issues. It matters how we, as an intellectual community, talk about these ideas, values, and issues. My aspiration is that Ohio University becomes known as a place where dialogue and rigorous civil debate are institutional hallmarks. The university continues to seek opportunities for learning and the free exchange of ideas, including events such as this one. And in the interest of ensuring an orderly event, audience members are asked to refrain from engaging in conduct that would be disruptive. I'm excited to hear from this evening's speaker, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming President Nellis to the stage to introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to have you all here for our inaugural lecture for this fall of our Ohio Challenging Dialogues for Contemporary Issues lecture series. And I wanted to thank, again, everyone for being here this evening. But I also wanted to call out a particular thank you to those that are here tonight who are part of the Challenging Dialogues Task Force. So those people that are here that are part of that, if you'd stand and let's give them a round of applause. Appreciate your commitment to that. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. So if this is your first time attending one of these lectures, you should know that this series does not seek to solve a specific issue or persuade someone to a particular conclusion. Instead, it's designed to help us all realize the importance of keeping lines of communication open. It's one of the first of its kind on college campuses across the United States, and I certainly hope that others will follow Ohio University's lead to bring a better understanding of contemporary issues that are impacting our world today, and we certainly see a lot of those today. We're very, very excited to have alumnus Kyle Bowser here with us this evening to lead us in his presentation, Trial by Jury, A Case of Deportation. Kyle received his Bachelor of Science degree from Ohio University in Radio, Television, and Film Communication, and his Juris Doctor degree from Widener University School of Law. And he's a member of the Pennsylvania and New Jersey Bar Associations. He is also a member of the Holyrood Foundation and the National Association of Multi-Ethnicity in Communication, for which he founded the annual Vision Awards. He received the coveted Legacy Award. He and his wife, Yvette Lee Bowser, live in Los Angeles with their two sons, Evan and Drew. And Kyle mentioned to me earlier this evening that I'm not sure whether it was Evan or Drew that just graduated from Ohio University this last May, so the next generation. So I'm very, very much looking forward to the presentation tonight, and I also am so thankful that Kyle is with us here. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Kyle Bowser. Thank you.
Bear with me. I was supposed to have done this some time ago, but I go on in and have a seat. Make yourselves comfortable. Welcome to you all, and thank you for welcoming me. As President Nellis said, I was just here in May for my son's graduation, which, as you might imagine, was a very proud moment for me and our family. My wife came, my other son came, my mother came, my sister came. It was a great day. Those of you who are current students, make your hotel reservations now. We had to stay in Columbus. Is this thing, oh, I didn't turn it on. You know, I do this stuff for a living. You think I, but let me explain why I'm a little absent. First, let me ask you to do me a favor. I would ask you all to close your eyes and imagine the finest set of cufflinks you can imagine. Now imagine that they're on my wrists. I accidentally left my cufflinks in the hotel, so forgive me. But it is really a pleasure for me to be here and have the president of the university introduce me. I was here a very, very long time ago as a student. I don't even think they had red brick roads when I was here. That's how long ago it was. But I have to admit to you, my scholarship was well, not all that my parents hoped it would be while I was a student. So that I would be here tonight lecturing is quite a reversal in my tide. But nonetheless, I'm excited. Trial by jury, a case of deportation, is one in a series of events that I produce that gives us an opportunity to get in a room and talk about challenging issues, have challenging dialogue about topical issues that our nation is grappling with. I believe the subject of immigration/deportation is one of those subjects. And so I'm hopeful that in this room, we have people who have opinions and are excited and willing to share those opinions. And I'm hoping that you're passionate about your opinions. We have a statue on our shore that seems to invite people from foreign lands to come here. Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. And for many people, that invitation was accepted, and they have enjoyed residence here for centuries. For other people, that invitation is on a, first come, first served, or on an as case basis, I guess is the way to say it. So what we're going to talk about is whether or not that invitation should apply to everyone, and if not, in what circumstances should it apply. What we're going to do is we're going to see a film first. That film is going to depict a trial followed by a jury deliberation. In the film, you will see what is an effort to stave off a deportation case. The plaintiff in this case is actually the person who is subject to deportation. This is not a deportation action. It is a civil action hoping to stave off the deportation action. The government is the defendant. So you're going to watch the trial. You're going to hear witnesses testify on both sides of the issue. And then you're going to watch a jury deliberate those issues that were raised at trial. But before we hear their verdict, we're going to stop the film. We're going to raise up these house lights again. And now we're going to hear from you, hopefully. And we're going to see where you stand on some of these issues. And ultimately, we're going to ask you to vote to determine the verdict in the case. Are you up for that? Great. So let's begin the film, and I'll see you in about a half hour.
I went to Australia one time, and that's...
So I know some people arrived a little late, so let me just give you a brief recap. We have a case here. Hey, Rich. We have a case here where a young man was seen walking down the street by police officers. He was wearing a tank top t-shirt. He had a tattoo on his arm, and the police officers recognized that tattoo as a gang insignia. And so they pull him over, they stop him on the street, they detain him, and they begin to question him about some recent gang activity. He's being uncooperative in that interrogation on the street, and they do find out that he is a DACA recipient, meaning he was not born in this country, although he has lived here most of his life. And the DACA privilege specifically carves out gang membership as a violation and requires that those members of gangs who are also DACA recipients be deported. And so the police turn him over to ICE, and he's now in the queue to be deported from this country. He is bringing a lawsuit against the government in an effort to stop that deportation action. We saw the case, then we saw 12 people as a jury deliberate the case. Are there any Gregory Pecks in this room? You have to be of a certain age to get that joke. There is an incredible play and film called 12 Angry Men about a jury trying to deliberate an issue, and there was one guy on the jury who basically turned everyone around. We all play Monday morning quarterback. We all think, if I were in that room, I could be the voice that makes a difference. So we're going to give you that opportunity. First thing we're going to do is take care of some housekeeping, all right? 12 of you I need to serve on a jury. I'm going to select 12 of you to go into a room that's just down the hall, give you about 15 minutes to have your own deliberation and to come to a verdict, and then return to this room. You'll join us at this table, and then we'll ask you a couple of questions about what happened in that room. So by a show of hands, can I see some volunteers who want to be a part of that 12-person jury? Come on, now, don't be scared. I tell you, I swear it won't hurt. Gentleman in the green shirt, the lady sitting in front of him, if you could come right down to the front and join John here to the side. That's the way I'll be able to keep account. Sir, in the t-shirt. That lady is that orange or red you have on there? Orange, okay. Now, is she a friend of yours? You guys are all friends in that row? I don't want any friends on the same jury. You don't know. She's a friend of yours, but you're going to denounce her, right? Do you know her also as well? Okay, so you come on down. Anybody down here? Gentleman in the black shirt. So, John, how many do you have? 2, 4, 5, 6. So we need 6 more. Pat, come on up. This lady here. Come on, Pat. This lady here on the end. And you? What are you up to now? How many do we have? This gentleman in the black jacket. You, with the blue shirt. Yeah, you. How many are we up to now, John? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We need 2. Oh, is this 11? 11. One more person. Miss, come on down. Thank you. I think we have 12. Did I pick too many? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12. Good. So 15 minutes is what you have, okay? It's going to take you 2 minutes to get to the room. When you get there, you're going to see in the middle of the table there's a form that has some wording on it. At the bottom, there's a line for someone to write either plaintiff or defendant. Slip that in an envelope and bring it back with you and take these chairs. See you in 15 minutes, okay? Now, while they're gone, the rest of us are going to start having a discussion. So I'm going to try to help kick off the discussion, if my battery hasn't gone dead here. It appears to have. I want to try to help, here we go, kick off our discussion by starting wide and then narrowing in our focus. Because ultimately, we have to make a decision about this specific case. But let's start really, really wide and ask this very, very broad question. What is an American, right? I just want to read to you real quickly. Of course, this is from the heralded book written by Hector St. John Clevecoeur, if anyone speaks French, I don't. But and this is from his letters from 3 farmers. What then is the American, this new man? He is either a European or the descendant of a European, hence that strange mixture of blood which you will find in no other country. He goes on, but later he says, he becomes an American by being received in the broad lap of our great alma mater. Here individuals of all nations are melted into a new race of men whose labors and posterity will one day cause great changes in the world. So what is an American is a very, very broad question, and I'd love to hear you all weigh in on that question. We have some volunteers here, and by the way, let's give them a round of applause. Not only because they're volunteers, but these are very special volunteers. They are members of the presidential leadership group here on campus. And so it is through their scholarship and civic involvement that they earn that distinction. So please regard them as special folk. But if I get one of you in one aisle and the other in the other aisle, then as people have raised their hands and want to share some thoughts with us, we can get a microphone to you. So who wants to weigh in for us? What is an American? What do you think is an American? This gentleman here.
An American is the real people who were here first, which was a Native American, pretty much. So they're the real Americans. What he's talking about is a distortion, total distortion.
Okay.
You know, I mean, we all know the deal. If you know your American history. You know, just last month, 400 years ago, they brought black people over here. 400 years ago last month, illegally. 400 years ago last month. Secondly, you know, you had the Irish with the potato. I mean, when they had the potato famine, I'm sure there were a lot of them that came over here because they were starving to death. A lot of them probably didn't come legally. Then, as far as this situation with Mexico, in just my opinion, we took Mexico. We stole Mexico. You know, they come up with that phony story, but the real story was that we stole Mexico and took California, New Mexico, Arizona. All that's supposed to be part of, naturally supposed to be part of Mexico. But in the last couple hundred years, we've had good relations despite that. So I think with just that country, I'm not speaking about all countries, but at least I don't see any problem why Mexicans can come over here, being when you look at the history of what we did in taking it in the first place. I think that's something that, like I said, we don't never know our history anyway.
Okay.
But like I said, that's something that should be, I think, should be discussed.
Okay. Well, one of the things that you said was, the first thing you said was that an American were the original inhabitants of this land. Correct. I don't think those people identified themselves as Americans. So the concept of America followed their existence. So if we feel it necessary as a nation to uphold a concept called America, then we need to understand what is that. Because what you're talking about is the chronology or the lineage of inhabitants on this soil. The folks that you referred to preceded the creation of the concept of America. So what is American? Here we have another comment here.
This is kind of following on to the idea that you just expressed. America is what the Constitution defined as American, and what the courts, the Supreme Court, has redefined over time. So when the Constitution was put together, Americans, and I think it's the second article in putting together the legislature, all freed persons. All other persons count as 3/5. Those were non-freed persons. They were all Native Americans who paid taxes. You know, so the Constitution defined who Americans were.
Got it.
And then over time, the courts redefined who was American. So an American today would be somebody who is born in this country, and you automatically get rights. And I think there might even be some cases questioning some of that. Mm-hmm. And Americans are those that you can be born in some American territories mm-hmm. and not have constitutional rights. You're a national, American national, but mm-hmm. you know, you don't have the rights.
Right. I haven't done a lot of international travel. I've done some. But my sense is that people of other national origin look at America not only as a physical place, but as an ideal. And so many of them, I believe, aspire to experience that ideal. Now the question is whether or not you can experience that ideal outside the borders of the nation. But that's really what I think the question is going to, is whether or not there's a concept that is America, that we need to strictly define as a nation? Yes, sir. Your hand is up, all the way in the back. And this lady's going to have a comment afterwards.
So when you start talking about the concept of American, you got to look at, first of all, the creation. And from the beginning, the founding fathers created this country with the full intention of it being Europeans, for the full intention of not having what they define. I don't use the word immigrant. They define immigrants basically from people that are non-European.
Right, that's what Predicor is referring to.
And with that being said, the Constitution itself was based on the premise that these Americans, as you call them, would be coming from Europe. A prime example, they dropped the 2 atomic bombs on Japan, but yet Germany was the threat. Mm-hmm. And I was in the military, and I actually was a nuclear missiles officer. And the concept is there was no way on God's green earth they would have dropped those bombs anywhere in Europe. So when you look at the concept of American, you have to look at it from a standpoint of they're talking about Europeans. And what is frustrating to most other non-Europeans, they understand that it's a sense of privilege that is denying them. This is why they're sneaking over the borders or doing whatever they need to do, because they understand that the system doesn't include them.
Got it. So now, if we go to the comment here, where there were indigenous people who first inhabited this space, right? And then we go to your commentary about folks who came here from elsewhere, principally from Europe, and established a concept and called that concept America, right? Although they're not native to the land, they in fact are the Native Americans. They're the original Americans, let's put it that way, right? Those who were here indigenously were not Americans. That's not, I'm not suggesting at all that they should not have been protected and their rights and privileges should not have been honored, but they were not American. And so now that we've created this thing and we've given it a name, is it improper for us to now have a list of rules that determines who gets to participate in that concept? Let's hear. You know, I don't know if all of you know this, but this weekend is the Black Alumni Reunion here at Ohio University. We do it every 3 years. And I just want to thank my folk for representing in this question and this commentary. Go ahead, Mo.
Okay, I just want to say, and like the brother said, they're the originators of the definition in itself were people who came from Europe. And then you want to talk about immigrants. You know, unfortunately, even today, as they come over and they want to be immigrants, they have a hard time dealing with a European definition of who they are and what they come to, because they have to immediately leave all their important mores and culture behind.
So if I come in your house and I put my feet up on your coffee table.
Yeah, we got a problem.
Right, we got a problem, right?
We got a problem, yeah.
So you get my analogy, right? If this space was founded by and is controlled by and largely governed by people who share a certain kinship or at least a certain perspective or worldview, let's call it, right? Shouldn't they also get to make the rules and regulations about who gets to participate in that experience? So you're going back to the invitation I was talking about earlier. So give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. That's the invitation. But the drawbridge is up to some. What's that? Okay, so I said we're going to, this lady wanted to have a comment. Let's hear from her. Go ahead.
So I apologize because I don't know how many non-American citizens are in this room, but I am one. I'm not a citizen. So I don't mean to sound over-informed or ambitious or offensive. but it can't be helped since the topic is so pertinent to the time and age we're living in right now. So I came to the US in 1997 as an international doctoral student. And believe me, in a year's time, when I went back to India for my first vacation back home, I was already branded as an American by my Indian friends, family. Oh, now you are all American because you have been to America. So the perception of America outside America, at least 20 years back, was a brand. Mm-hmm. It was abstract, it was elusive, it was more experience-based than it was ever about your citizenship, where were you born, how many years have you lived there, and what's your quality of life.
But
it was all about just...
But if I understand you correctly, you're sharing the sentiment of non-Americans and their perspective on what American is, correct?
To begin with. So I want to begin there because
Go
that's
ahead.
where I come from.
Sure,
I cannot
I just
talk
wanna make
from
sure
the
I was
other
clear.
person's
I just want to make sure I was
perspective.
clear. Go ahead.
But so it was for a long time an abstraction. Now, most countries of the world have had to deal with that abstraction of America. And America has enjoyed that immensely over the years and generations of having that abstraction, that branding, and that elusiveness, whether it was to attract more people here or to give them the amenities and the facilities that it did. So it's been a very fair, kind of an exchange of good, bad, ugly, all in the same package. But it's only of late that we're starting to question here the ideas of birth, the ideas of naturalization, the ideas of if your children are born here, are they American? Do they have dual citizenship? Now, most countries of the world that have been 10,000 years old, like mine, have dealt with this forever and is actually living with a lot of peace, a lot of happiness, and a lot of ambiguity as well. There is a certain sense of ambiguity that has to be embedded in the idea of citizenship, in the idea of nationhood, in the idea of what it means to be American XYZ.
Would that be the case in any nation? Or is it specific
not
to
many,
this?
but the ones that I have, and I've traveled a lot of world.
Can you name another nation that is beyond its physical borders, it is in and of itself a brand?
In my generation, it was to reach America. That was the brand that we talked
Can
about.
anyone in the room identify another?
The UK.
So when you think of UK, you don't
UK.
think of a national board, you don't think of a geographic place, you think of a brand?
Yeah, it is. It's got historical relevance more than its political relevance, I feel. Being the colonizer of mostly the entire
Gotcha.
world, obviously
Gotcha.
it has a position we cannot contest with. And if any country has given them a kind of a competition, it's the American
Got it.
soil.
Okay.
So my point really is, I want to summarize by saying, this conversation is ripe here, and I'm part of it because I live here and I feel invested in it. But this conversation is been age-old in most countries, and they've dealt with it. They have not damaged people and communities and cultures at the cost of the elusiveness and the abstraction of being American. Some things can be left as that and respected, and people can be invitational and welcoming as it has always been. 20 years back, I never doubted coming to the US and worried about my survival. It's only now, after being in America for 20 years and having children here, I'm for the first time raising questions of citizenship. And I think that's really a loss for a culture, a loss for a place like this, which has always been so amazingly invitational. And I think that it'll get over it. It's a birthing cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you
you very much. I want to share with you, we have a professor in our midst who teaches on a branch campus. Her name is Dr. Amy White. She's sitting right here. And she has some very valuable information to share with us, not only from her own scholarship, but the students that she spends time with don't necessarily share the views that you've heard so far in this room. And I'd like, by the way, just a public service announcement, I'd like to hear from more of you, because my sense is that there are some of you who either strongly agree or disagree with what you've heard already. We need to get that conversation going. But I'd like to ask Dr. White to give us some insight on what she's heard so far. Is that on? Oh, my bad. They told me to turn this on before I gave it to you, and I didn't do it. There you are.
Yeah, no, it is. Want me to stand up like this again? I do teach on a branch campus where the demographics of the students are very, very different. A couple years ago, when we had the question of whether we should allow guns on campuses, there was a survey sent out, and overwhelmingly, most of the students in Athens said absolutely not. On the regional campuses, it was almost a 90% yes. So, you know, my neighbors already have their Trump signs up. And, well, to make matters worse, I actually live about an hour from Zanesville and an hour from here in the middle, and it's, yeah, in the middle of nowhere, so very, very rural place. So at this point, I mean, I think that my students would articulate many of the ideas that were brought up in the discussion. I mean, the first thing that they would be concerned about is probably not the history of who is America, but what do we do now, right? I mean, technically an American is just someone with American citizenship. And I think the first thing that they would articulate, which yesterday when I went to the gym, I parked by a truck that had, you know, an outline of the United States on it that says, "We're full, stay out." Is that, you know, you can't have open borders. That if you had open borders, especially given all this hype from the United States, we would simply be overrun. So the question of some immigration regulation has to come in place. So what would it be? And I think a lot of them would worry about jobs. A lot of them would worry about changing the national character, which we could have a discussion with. And this isn't only something that's happening in the United States. I have the perspective of being, I come from an English father and an American mother, and I kind of yo-yoed as a child. And so if you ask the English what is an American, they'll generally say the people with the guns. So, yeah, I know, 2 colonizers, right? I know. But, so it's a very different discussion, and it doesn't have to be stagnant, right? You know, what counts as something at one time could develop and change. You know, history is important to where we got where we are, but it need not, you know, stay stagnant, and probably shouldn't stay stagnant in most cases. So now I want to reiterate that my views are generally very different from my students. I am left of center, and in the past few years have basically fallen off the map. But my students are all generally very conservative, and immigration is very important issue to them. A lot of them support Trump because he believes he'll keep our borders safe. And safety is very important. There's been a lot of psychological studies done that people that identify as more conservative value safety and security and have a faster fear trigger response. Now, neither way is a better way to look at the world, though. So we do have to recognize that, you know, we are the same species, but we quite different views on this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I hope that helps a little.
Oh, it will. It does. It does. And we're going to hear more from you. When you guys were out of the room, we started our discussion, and I said we would start wide, and then we would sort of narrow the focus and get down to what you were asked to do, which was to come to a verdict, right? We started with this basic question that's on the screen: what is American? We're going to narrow the focus a little more. Rich spoke about the Constitution and the Constitution defining what is American. I'll tell you something interesting if you don't know. 25 of the 55 drafters of the Constitution were slave owners. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. The 14th Amendment goes on to try to define what citizenship is. The word slavery is nowhere in the Constitution at all. And the word citizenship does not exist in the Constitution. Citizens does, however. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Now, reconcile that with what remains. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So the first half of that clearly talks about citizenship. And the back half of it talks about persons. And I think within the 14th Amendment, we have a real dilemma. We have a dichotomy here. Who are we supposed to be looking out for? Citizens or persons? Anybody have any thoughts about that? Yes, ma'am.
I see a lot of cognitive dissonance right there because I'm of African descent, and when I think of Americans, I think of Americans who are of African descent, Italian descent, who are born here, and people who naturalized because they came from other countries. So when I think about what's going on in the news with immigrants, I think that they're persons. When you think about these babies that are in this deportation, they're persons. And when we marginalize them by calling them illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants or just immigrants, period, this 14th Amendment tells us that they're persons and they're privileged to all the rights and the inalienable rights of U.S. citizens. That's what that says, but it's not what's happening right now.
Did everybody hear that? She didn't have a microphone, but I think she made a point pretty strongly. Yes, sir.
The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, very interesting piece of literature. The 14th Amendment is what really is getting us in trouble now because it's saying any person naturally born on American soil, although they did not mention the newly freed slaves at that time. This was just a ploy to more or less get as many votes as they could for the Democratic Party at that time. Oh, I'm sorry, the Republican Party at that time. Natural born citizens, meaning now when you have illegal, or I don't like to use that word illegal, when you have immigrants coming over the border from wherever, if they give birth on American soil, that child is a citizen.
What this says to me is whether you are here legally or illegally.
Exactly.
If you are a person
Born here.
right? No state shall deprive you of life, liberty, or property without due process, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection. So if you are a person, irrespective of your national origin or the legality of your presence,
Exactly.
right? If you're a person, you're not to be denied these rights and privileges. However, the top part specifically identifies what's required of citizenship.
But that's what's getting them in
For
trouble.
citizenship.
That's what's getting them in trouble because that's what's happening, and they basically were outsmarted.
Now, I know we are on the campus of my beloved Ohio University, and I know this is a primarily liberal bastion, but I also know we can walk a couple blocks away, we can hear some other points of view. There's got to be somebody in this room who has a counter argument to most of what you've heard here tonight. I'd love to hear that point of view. Anyone? I promise it won't hurt. All right, well, let's go to our, there we go, finally. Yes, ma'am.
It isn't exactly a counter argument, but I just think looking at the amendment, if you look at the first part, it specifically talks about privileges and immunities.
Yes.
And if you look at the second part, it, I think, is talking more about rights and things like opportunity and the right to equal treatment.
Yes.
And I think that that's not necessarily a contradictory thing when you're
Gotcha.
talking about the difference between citizenship and non-citizenship.
So with citizenship, those rights are inherent and inalienable. With personhood, you shall not be denied those privileges without at least due process. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Got it. Wait, while you still have the microphone, I'm just curious. Do you think that we should have some measure of immigration checks and balances? Or should we just have simply open borders?
Well, I think that if you just had open borders, then things could turn into chaos really quickly, especially if you have situations in other part of the world where people need help that we may not be able to necessarily provide them, and it's beyond our capacity to help.
Right.
And if we are put in a situation where we can't even help ourselves or take care of ourselves, then we certainly can't help take care of other people. So I think there needs to be a way that we can maintain our own sustainability and still balance that with helping other countries, because I think that's important too.
Do you think we should scrub the poem at the base of the Statue of Liberty that says, "Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free"?
No, I
You
think that's
a false promise or false invitation, I should say.
No, I don't think it's false promise.
Okay.
I think that that's a really important ideal to have, to be able to.
As an ideal. As an ideal. So I see your hand. I'm going to call you in 1 second. I agree with you. It's an important ideal to have. There are some who might argue that the American experiment is buttressed by a series of ideals. And as long as we perpetuate those ideals, that we will sustain our way of life. The question is whether the ideals are realized by everyone who is a part of the experiment. I don't know. There was a lady who just had her hand up. Yeah, there you are.
Going off what she said, I think, yeah, having open borders could get messy really quickly, but instead of like having those, we should accept people, we should change the ways that we're accepting people and let people in from countries that are less fortunate than us. Like he was talking about in there, like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and reform our refugee statuses, because we have the resources to help these people. I mean, we're wasting so many resources.
So just yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled that those who are seeking asylum must first obtain asylum from the countries that they pass through on their way here. So if you're in Honduras, I don't remember the sequence of countries in Central America, but if you eventually get to Mexico, you may have to travel through some other countries to even get to Mexico. I don't know where Honduras is. But when you get to Mexico, you got to get asylum from Mexico first before you show up here. And then there was those who might ask, well, if you have received the asylum from Mexico, you fled whatever it was that was persecuting you, why must you continue to travel north? You've already achieved your goal.
I don't know why they did that. I think that's a stupid decision.
John Rogers knows why they did that. John Rogers was kind enough to get a whole stack of voter registration forms that you will find at the table out in the lobby when you leave. My understanding is in the state of Ohio, in order for you to serve on a jury, you must be a registered voter. That may not be in every county, but in most of the counties of the state, that's a requirement. So if you disagree with that Supreme Court decision, you might want to make sure that you're a registered voter, and you might want to vote for those who might change the look of the court. I want to hear from these kind people who went down the hall and talked and hopefully came to a decision. Okay. Was there some debate? Was everybody on the same page? Let's start there. Everybody was on the same page? That doesn't work. No. There was a little debate, like on some nuance. What was some of the nuanced things about your discussion? Somebody speak. Yes, ma'am.
We kind of talked about the tattoo and if that was like reasonable, like for them to stop him. And we kind of talked about how.
Well, wait. Does anybody on the jury have a tattoo?
I do.
Okay. When you got your tattoo, did you intend to keep it for life? Does it represent something of substance to you, or is it just something you did you got drunk uptown and you said, let me go get it? No, it was something that really meant something to you? Okay, so this gentleman has a tattoo that represents the Los Diablos street gang, right? It's stamped on his arm. And this pardon me? Hmm?
Only thing we're saying that he has a tattoo.
He has a tattoo.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see that.
A tattoo is, by some standards, a form of art. It's a form of speech. It's a form of speech, right? You say you have, what kind of, I don't want to get too personal, but what do you have?
I have an equal sign, but
Equals.
it's also a pause sign.
It's also a pause sign.
Yeah, because you have to pause and reflect in order to make equal change.
So you clearly are making a statement with that, right? So that's a form of speech. I believe the First Amendment protects speech, right? Okay, but the DACA privilege is very clear that gang membership is a disqualification and will render one subject to deportation. So, before you tell me your verdict, did this jury conclude that Gabriel Rodriguez is or is not a member of a gang?
Well,
We never.
I would say we concluded that there was not evidence.
Enough
presented
evidence to, okay.
That he was.
Hypothetically, had you had enough information to determine that he is a member of the gang, would that have affected your ultimate vote for the verdict?
No, because the action of having,
Go ahead.
his having the tattoo.
Yes.
Is not a crime, right?
The tattoo,
you
right.
are allowed to be a member, like they said in the video, right? You're a member. You're allowed free speech and peaceable assembly. His walking down the street is no crime, and his being tattooed is not a crime. His crime would be a crime, but that's not what they pulled him over.
What about the membership in the Los Diablos street gang?
If they got it if they got that information by lawful means.
So that's where the young lady in the back who made the distinction between the top half and the bottom half of the 14th Amendment. You could be a member of the Girl Scouts, you can be a member of the bowling team, you can be a member of the KKK, you can be a member of the Nazi Party. Your membership alone is not a crime. In fact, it's protected by the First Amendment. You have freedom of assembly, right? Now, some of those organizations participate in illegal activity, and that certainly is a crime. But your membership in the organization in and of itself is not the crime. That's so for citizens. But for persons who are only really guaranteed due process, the government has decided that membership in a street gang for DACA recipients is enough due process for you to go. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just going back really quick, and I promise I'll answer what you just said. Just from my understanding of the Constitution as a whole, I feel like if the framers of the Constitution wanted it to say citizens, they would have, and I feel like it's very intentional that it does not. And along those lines, then, like, I understand your point about only guaranteeing due process. Well, I would argue that due process wasn't given to him because of the reason for his stop being unconstitutional in the first place. But even further, like, he's protected under the First Amendment, like you said, for freedom of speech, the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, and then I would also argue the Fifth Amendment, because the woman in the jury was like, well, he wouldn't give information to the police if he did know anything about his friends, which he is protected under the Fifth Amendment. So
against self-incrimination.
Self-incrimination, and then, yeah. But, so yeah, I just wanted to say that I feel like even if they proved that he was in the gang, that'd be irrelevant to the case because it was brought unconstitutionally to the court.
So in the law, there's this concept called the fruit of the poisonous tree, right? So that if the government finds some illegal substance, some kind of contraband on this gentleman, but they found it by violating his rights, they burst in his home without a warrant or whatever that might be, the fact that they found that thing cannot now be used against him. Are undocumented immigrants entitled to that same protection? Okay. Anybody disagree with that? Anybody have a different opinion about whether or not undocumented residents of this country should be entitled to the same protections, even though that's what the thing says? That's what it says. Okay, so you guys didn't determine if he was a gang member, or you didn't determine if he was a gang member or not, and now you're saying even if he was a gang member, that would not necessarily change your opinion, right?
I don't think we discussed that far. We stopped at he violated his DACA if he was a gang member.
And we don't know if he's a gang
and
member.
there was no proof that he was a gang member.
The tattoo is not enough.
No.
Him being down, as the sister said, is not enough.
What does that mean?
You know what I've heard no discussion, and maybe it came up in your jury discussion, but I've heard no one talk about the last witness, Corey Grant, who had applied for a job at the movie theater. Tell us what that was about.
Yeah, we thought it was completely irrelevant because that's just trying to scare the jury, saying that he's trying to steal our jobs.
Yep.
But isn't that a very resonant perspective? One second, Rich. I want to hear one more time from Dr. White here. Do you hear that from your students?
I do, quite often.
You guys missed this. So Dr. White is a professor at a branch campus. And oh, you were here for that? Go ahead. I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah, no, I hear that quite a bit. And I also hear that, with limited resources and, perhaps, someone like a gang member shouldn't be someone that we open the doors for. If we only can allow some people in, maybe we shouldn't, have the gang member. I think my students would also say something along the lines of, okay, well, yeah, people are entitled to due process, but, I mean, a DACA reciprocant, right? They have to do certain things in order to stay here that perhaps our citizens don't. It's an extra protection, like someone on probation would have to do.
It's a privilege.
Right, exactly.
It's not an entitlement, it's a privilege.
Right, and they have to pay a fee every year. If they don't pay their fee, they could get deported. So for them, gang membership just might be another one of those things that although they're required, by Constitution to have peaceful assembly, that maybe, this is one of those lines that, we have to put to prevent, just us being overrun by gang members. Sorry.
The gentleman in the red shirt in the back, I'd like to hear from him, but I'm also curious to know, would this group feel that there's any major distinction between gang membership and gang affiliation? So affiliation would be, if the DACA law says if you're gang affiliated, you can be deported, then well, I'm asking you, would Gabriel Rodriguez then have to go?
Just like they said, the neighborhood, if you're in the neighborhood with them, you're going to be affiliated. Right? There's no two ways about it. Okay? You don't have to be a member. Okay? Some of them might make you, but again, there's certain ways to get up out of it, and it might cost you some skin, but you don't have to be a member.
Okay. This gentleman in the red shirt.
Well, I actually want to address both of the issues. The first one of that last witness, I think his testimony is completely irrelevant, to be honest, because I don't feel that whether or not a job was taken or if it wasn't, I don't feel that has any validity towards the argument if the man should be deported. I don't feel like that has anything to do with DACA. And then for the affiliation thing, I would argue that if I had a tattoo of the Pittsburgh Steelers, it doesn't mean I play for them. It could mean I just, right? So if you have a tattoo, it doesn't necessarily mean you're affiliated. So I feel like there is a difference between affiliation and that, but I also feel like, again, the whole last testimony, if I was the opposing counsel, I'd be objecting to the witness's testimony for the reason that I don't feel like it's relevant.
It is, however, well documented that gang members, a number of gang members, wear tattoos specifically for the purpose of identifying themselves as a member, unlike Pittsburgh fans. So, but it's a very good point. I saw somebody raise their hand when I asked a question about something over here. Somebody had their hand raised. Yes, ma'am. There's a microphone right behind you.
Sorry, I guess I'll just have
Go
to
ahead.
hold the whole thing.
Go
It's
ahead.
probably irrelevant now, but I guess my point and it's not against the doctor right here, but it's not an issue of people taking other people's jobs. Everybody in the United States has an opportunity to take a job. It's the chance we don't take. So if someone else, if he's willing to scrub a floor, sweep a floor, wash dishes as part of his job, and we all have job responsibilities, and what does it say in our job description? All other duties as assigned. So if you're not willing to do all other duties as assigned and someone else is, then you're going to get the job. It doesn't matter if it's $10, $2 less or more, But in essence, really, you have a choice. All of us have a choice. All of us have an opportunity to get a job. If we don't take it and someone else comes from another country and they assume a job or they come in and they take that job, it doesn't mean they took it from me.
Got it.
Because I had the same opportunity.
The lady behind you wants to say something as well. Go ahead.
Oh, it's heavy. Okay. I wanted to go.
She's got a laptop, so I don't know what she's about to say. Go ahead.
I knew that I was going to forget everything I was going to say, so I had to
Go
write
ahead.
it down. I wanted to go back to the professor's counter-argument from her students and how that like we're bringing in dangerous people, maybe.
Mhm.
And I was thinking that like these DACA kids were not born here. They were brought here like at a very young age, so they grew up here. And if they turn out to be bad people, it's because of the culture they grew up in, which was American culture.
They didn't
So
bring
should
that with them. You're saying they didn't bring that with them. Although there are some people who would argue that they have innate predilection
about
to.
that is that there are plenty of American-born citizens who commit mass shootings at schools and stuff. Should we be monitoring every birth for every genome in the human species to see who constitutes a bad person, a dangerous person, someone who is going to bring crime into America? Should we be killing those children?
Right.
Should we be sending them off to
Right.
who knows where, even though they were born here, raised here?
Okay, so we're going to land this plane. I see a couple more hands I'm going to hear from, but I just want to get you guys know this jury was asked to go into a room and they were given this form, Rodriguez v. United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's ICE, okay? And the question presented is whether the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, may pursue an action for deportation against an undocumented immigrant suspected of street gang affiliation, or is such an action prohibited by constitutional protections? So that was the specific question that this jury was asked to answer, and you're going to be asked to answer, and the jury on film was asked to answer. And now I'd like to hear from the jury foreperson and answer. The jury finds in favor of?
The jury finds in favor of the plaintiff,
The plaintiff, Gabriel Rodriguez. So this jury votes in favor of the plaintiff. That was a big surprise, right? When you arrived, hopefully you received a program, right, that had, you know, an ugly picture of me, but inside there are two slips of paper. One is red and one is green. The purpose of this is when I ask you to, I need you to hold up either the red or the green page to indicate which of the two parties you're voting for in the verdict, okay? We're going to assign the green page to the plaintiff, which is Gabriel Rodriguez, and we're going to assign the red page to the government as the defendant. This is going to be a shocker, I know. But I'm curious to know, how did this jury decide? Please hold up the page that you agree with. That is microphone, please. We have one holdout. This is Gregory Peck, everyone. Gotcha. Yes, sir.
Well, I think there are two very separate discussions that we need to have. There's the discussion of what should the law be, and there's the discussion of what is the law. And most of our discussion, very interestingly, was about what do we think should the law be. When we talk about what is the law and what do we need to uphold, it's really not the Constitution, because this is not the Supreme Court, this is a regional court, and so the only question is, what is the law? And so the question is, if the law is, if he is a gang member, then he needs to be deported. The question is he a gang member? And I followed sort of your lead. Several times you said he is a gang member. And since you said he is a gang member, I think he needs to be deported.
Gotcha.
That's what the law says.
Got you. I understand. So I've been given the heads up that we're going to have to adjourn this pretty soon. Thank you for your participation. Appreciate it. I know this young lady wanted to share a thought with us. So here's a microphone.
Just because I don't really know. So because, like, obviously he is a plaintiff in this situation, but before, when his DACA was revoked from him for suspected gang affiliation, would that be a criminal case and like beyond a reasonable doubt, or would that be civil and a preponderance of evidence? Because preponderance of evidence, I could see how that would lead somebody to say, yes, he is affiliated, because it's a lesser
Deportations fall under criminal law.
Okay, so then there should be a higher standard of evidence, which I don't
Right.
think they meant. That's
Right.
all I wanted to ask.
There's not a jury in a deportation
No,
case.
that's why this is not a deportation case. Right. So, I want to thank these people for volunteering. You guys can return to your seats now. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. So we heard from this jury, we heard from the larger jury in the room. There's one more jury we need to hear from. And then we have a very quick public service announcement, and we're going to adjourn, okay? So thank you very much for your attention tonight. It really helps. President Nellis, I'm sure you're proud to see that we had a challenging dialogue that was handled very civilly. I think we had some substantive discussion here. Let's see what the jury on film has to say, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
That officially concludes the Challenging Dialogues lecture for this evening. Kyle does want to give one brief announcement about another showing that's coming up on Saturday.
So for all of you who enjoyed this experiment here tonight, we're doing this same format, but a completely different issue on Saturday at the Athena Cinema. That program is called Trial by Jury, the Case of the N-Word, where we literally will litigate the N-Word, a whole other fact pattern, plaintiff and defendant witnesses, jury, and a discussion just like this. So 2 o'clock on Saturday, if you're available and interested, please come through. We'd love to. It's free admission. We'd love to see you there. Oh, and more importantly, it's air conditioned. So please come through, okay? Thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate it.